I do want to stay on college football, but really kind of want to switch gears and talk about really what the big topic in college football is right now. And that is, of course, the present and future of Nebraska football. Obviously, on Sunday's show, Monday's show, we talked a little bit about the fact that Scott Frost was fired, thought it was the right decision, thought the timing was now. But we also talked about candidates. I do think that if you're Nebraska Cornhuskers, Matt Rule, Carolina Panthers, you want to be rooting against the Carolina Panthers. So hopefully this guy gets let go and you have a legitimate shot to get him. But in the bigger picture of Nebraska, what I want to do is kind of move this conversation forward on Nebraska football and really just discuss, what's next for this program. And more importantly, I think the conversation that everybody in college football is having right now, how good is the job itself, right? We all know it's well documented. This is a program that has won not only a national championship, but multiple national championships in most of our lifetimes, maybe some of our lifetimes, maybe not most of them. But it's obviously a program that has fallen on hard times. And so the conversation is, how good is it? How good is it not? What kind of realistic candidates should they be pursuing? And I thought I saw an interesting quote from my buddy Barrett Sallee, CBS Sports, a college football mind that I have a ton of respect for. He said this as it pertains to the Nebraska coaching search. He said, if Nebraska is approaching big names or even up and coming names, it's approaching this all wrong. It needs to ask itself if Nebraska is good enough for its candidates, not if the candidates are good enough for Nebraska. And so that quote really stuck with me, and it really started kind of just kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but really kind of gauging and creating interest in me in talking about this Nebraska job, the pluses and minuses, and really how good of a job it is in the modern era. Because as I've said the last few days, I do believe that it's probably a little bit of a better job than a lot of people think it is, but also one that comes with some real hurdles to build a respectable team in college football in 2022. And I do think when I look at Nebraska, look, the hurdles, the things that hold this Nebraska job back are things that you guys and girls already know. Specifically, it's all about recruiting, right? When we talk college football, the good jobs in college football in 2022, it's all about, do you have access to players, right? It was funny. I saw a quote from Nick Saban the other day. I thought it was perfect. Nick Saban was on with my buddy Colin Cowherd to preview the season probably about 2-3 weeks ago. And Colin asked Nick Saban, he said, why at 71 years old do you love to recruit the way that you do? And Nick Saban gave an incredible answer. He said, I learned a long time ago, it's really hard to coach bad players to be good. And so I go out and try to get the best players that I can every single year because it makes my job easier and it makes me look better. Now, I'm paraphrasing what Nick Saban said, but that's the bottom line. That's the truth. And that's what makes a good coaching job in 2022. It's not about history. It's not about facilities. It's not about this. It's not about that. It's, do you have access to good players in 2022? And that's what makes Georgia an elite coaching job, LSU an elite coaching job, USC, Ohio State, Florida, Miami, whatever, Florida State, elite coaching jobs. It's also what makes the Nebraska job so challenging, right? I looked it up just for fun. I was kind of blown away by this. Nebraska's entire state population is like 1.9 million people, okay? 1.9 million people for the entire state. For comparison's sake, New Orleans as a city has 1.2 million people. The Atlanta metro area has 5.1 million people. So, Atlanta, the weather, the this, the that, they just have 5 times as many people just in Atlanta. Forget the rest of Georgia. 5 times as many people in there. Or I guess it would be probably not 5 times, but 2.5 times the number of people in Atlanta as there are in the state of Nebraska. It's just a tough place. There's not a lot of players. There's not a lot of people. And then I do think the narrative that, Nebraska's region to recruit in has really been impacted by the move from the Big 12 to the Big 10 about, a decade ago. I do think that's pretty accurate, right? I mean, for people who do not remember, back in the day when Nebraska really was last, at the very least, respectable, winning 10, 11 games, 10, maybe not 10, 11, but 9, 10 games, competing for conference championships, finishing in the top 10, finishing in the top 20. It was a program that was able to recruit Texas in large part because they still played in Texas quite a bit as a member of the Big 12. Go back to the Big 12 days. They played Texas every year. They played Texas A&M every year. They played Texas Tech, Baylor, etc. Now, moving to the Big Ten, they don't really have a recruiting footprint. It's harder to recruit kids from Texas because of the fact that, it's harder to recruit kids in Texas because of the fact that you don't play in Texas anymore. And then obviously, it's harder to recruit the Big Ten footprint because most of those places are already locked up. Hard to get kids out of Ohio that are good enough to play at Ohio State. Hard to get kids out of Pennsylvania that are good enough to play at Penn State. You're kind of far from that Eastern Seaboard, Maryland and New Jersey, which obviously Ohio State and Penn State have recruited really well. So you have no natural recruiting base. And I think that is when people say this is not a very good job in 2022. It's hard to argue with the fact that it's really hard to recruit. There's no natural base, and the natural base that you did have is no longer accessible. I think those are fair things to say, and I think it's why a lot of people seem to think that this is a job that you are going to struggle with. You are going to struggle. It's a job that you are going to struggle to succeed at for those specific reasons. What I would also say is, I do think some of it's overblown, and I do think some of it is misleading, if you will, in 2022. First of all, and I want to get this out there right now, this second, because I think it is the biggest misnomer about this Nebraska job and the Nebraska fan base as well. People outside of Nebraska need to stop saying, well, Nebraska, they need to know it's not 1995 again. Nebraska fans know that. I deal with a lot of them on a daily basis because I've been talking a lot of Nebraska the last few weeks. Talked about them with the Urban Meyer rumors, with the firing, with the Northwestern game. I have yet to talk to a single Nebraska fan that expects it to be 1995 and you're competing for national championships. But do I believe they can recruit well enough to go 8-4 most years, 9-3 once in a while, get to 10-2, 11-1? I do think they can. Can they recruit well enough? Let me put it this way. Can they recruit well enough to beat the teams that they've been losing to? Illinois, Purdue, Northwestern, Minnesota. I do believe that they can. And when I look at why I think Nebraska is a better job than people think, there's a couple reasons. One, I think the recruiting narrative is a little overblown, okay? So I went back and looked it up. Scott Frost actually recruited pretty well at Nebraska, which is what makes all of this disappointing. So let's take out last year's recruiting class, 2022, when he was on the hot seat, and look at the previous three classes under Scott Frost, the three full recruiting classes that he had when he was on campus recruiting as the Nebraska head coach. 2021, they had the number 20 recruiting class in the country. 2020, they had the number 20 recruiting class in the country, and they had the number 17 recruiting class in 2019. So I'm not great at math, but in Scott Frost's three full classes before last year, when everybody knew he was coaching for his job, he had three top 20 classes in 3 years. Now, that's not going to beat Georgia. That's not going to beat Alabama. But again, should it beat Purdue? Should it beat Northwestern? Should it beat Illinois? Yeah, it probably should. And there's no reason to think that the next coach can't do it either. And I would add this on recruiting too. I get the notion that Nebraska, their natural recruiting base is gone. They don't recruit Texas anymore. They can't recruit Texas. The reason they can't get good players out of Texas is because they're not winning, okay? That is the biggest reason. Because in 2022, recruiting is more national than it's ever been. Bryce Young is from California, wanted to go to Alabama because he could compete for championships, get developed for the NFL. That's why he didn't go to USC. That's why he went to Alabama. That's why DJ, we thought he was going to Clemson to be developed for the NFL. Turns out it didn't work out very well. But I bring it up. CJ Stroud, Ohio State. Chris Olave, wide receiver, top 10 draft pick, was at Ohio State from San Diego. Oh, by the way, Garrett Wilson, top 10 draft pick, played at Ohio State from Texas. And so this idea that you can't recruit a place because you don't play there is nonsense. Some of Ohio State's best players are from Texas. Jackson Smith and Jigba, their star wide receiver, is from Texas. I looked it up today. It's not just Michigan State, or it's not just Ohio State, excuse me. Michigan State played really well last year on the field. Guess what? 2023 recruiting class, they have 2 4-stars committed from the state of Texas, 2 4-stars committed from the state of Florida. You can recruit well nationally if you give players a reason to come to your school. And I look at Nebraska and I say, the right coach, you're going to be able to get guys if you win. Kids in 2022, they want to go to a place that they can win at a high level and be developed for the NFL. If you can do that at Nebraska, you can do that anywhere. And so when I look at Nebraska, I think it's a better job because I think those recruiting narratives are a little bit outdated, a little bit overblown. And I also think the other recruiting narrative that nobody talks about, that I'm the only one that talks about, the transfer portal is a game changer. The transfer portal is a game changer. As I told you on Sunday's show, look at Nebraska's roster right now. Their starting quarterback played at Texas last year. Their starting top wide receiver played at Texas last year. Their second best wide receiver played at LSU last year. They have a safety from Alabama who played at Alabama last year. The portal is a difference maker. Yes, they might not be able to get some of those elite guys out of high school, but let them sit on the bench at Georgia for a year. Let them sit on the bench at Alabama for a year. All of a sudden, Nebraska can get some guys that they might not have been able to get out of high school. 7 players that transferred in this year, I looked it up, were 4 stars or better coming out of high school. On top of that, they killed it in the portal. They signed a few FCS All-Americans, a few Group of 5 guys, and oh, by the way, as I said many times, O'Shawn Mathis, a guy that was a 3-star who developed into an all Big 12 player. So you take the fact that Nebraska isn't recruiting as poorly as you think, and they can have success in the portal. I'm telling you, I think this job is, again, better than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. A couple other things. One, keep in mind this, and I say this because it's important. Listen, I'm not saying I'm anybody important, but I do talk on most days. I talk to somebody that coaches in college sports or is an administrator. Okay, I bring it up not to brag, not to say I'm anybody important. I'm nobody, but I bring it up to say when you ask a coach what makes a good job or a bad job, number one is obviously recruiting, like I said, and you can't replicate that if you're Nebraska. But the other thing you can't replicate having 5 million people in the greater Atlanta area like Kirby Smart has access to. But at the same time, what most coaches will say, number one, it's all about recruiting. But number two, are you at a place where you have everything that you need to win? Administrative, facilities, stadium, fan base. You can't argue that Nebraska has all that. $200 million facility is getting completed as we speak, okay? Size of 6 football fields. Incredible. Insane. Go look at the renderings. It's going to be insane. Now, everybody has a football field. Everybody has an indoor facility. I get that. They also have one of the craziest fan bases, I think the most passionate fan base in college football, okay? This isn't a school that if you go on a 2-game losing streak, nobody's going to show up. They had 90,000 people in Memorial Stadium on Saturday night to watch Nebraska lose to Georgia Southern. 90,000 people, okay? And so when you talk about the portal, when you talk about recruiting, when you talk about a fan base that is going to support players on the field, financially and NIL, this job is better than people realize. And I'd say 2 other things as well as it pertains to this job and then who could potentially take it. One, I've said it a few times, I think the college football playoff expanding is a game changer. Because again, as I said, I don't think Nebraska fans want it to be or think it is 1994 anymore. They just want to be good. They want to be respectable. They want to have, I think, and Nebraska fans, tell me if I'm wrong. DM me on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. Leave a comment in the YouTube section. I think most Nebraska fans, they just don't want to be embarrassed. And every once in a while, can we have that 10-2 season that Iowa had last year? The 10-2 season Wisconsin has had. If Iowa can go 10-2 like they did last year and play for a Big Ten championship, and if there was a 12-team playoff last year, they probably would have been in. There's no reason that Nebraska can't do it. Maybe not every year, but every once in a while. And so I do think the expanded playoff helps. This is now a place where you can compete at a high level. It's not LSU. It's not Georgia. It's not Bama. It's not USC. I get that. But it ain't Washington State either. It ain't Vandy either. You can build a team that can finish in the top 12 and make a playoff at Nebraska. Because of all that, I think this job is better. And what I would finally say, I think the one thing Nebraska really has going for it, I do think it's going to be a pretty quiet coaching cycle. You look at the jobs that are going to open. Florida State's not going to open. Mike Norvell's got it rolling. Auburn might, but Auburn is chaos. I don't think anybody's choosing Auburn over Nebraska to be second fiddle in Alabama behind Nick Saban for a fan base that wants you out after 2 bad games. After 1 season, they're making stuff up like they did with Brian Harsin. So you look at the jobs that are going to open. There isn't going to be an LSU this year. There isn't going to be a USC this year. There's going to be a Florida this year. Because of it, I think Nebraska is probably a better job than people realize. And I think they're going to get a candidate that's better than people realize as well.